Okay, hello everyone. It's 8:30, so let's start. Thanks for being here on time. It seems we are losing a few more every week. So we see what happens. Okay, so last week I started talking about critical path method, and because perhaps it was the first time for some of you who were using this method, we started with basics. We drew the network, all the relationships were finished to start. There was not really a complication in calculating the early start, early finish, late start, late finish. But this week we want to look at all the different activity relationships and how you can actually address different relationships in a critical path method and do the calculations and so on and so forth. So I will have a few reminders at the beginning, and then we'll talk about CPM. And by the end of the lecture, I will talk about a concept called float or slack, which is really important in project planning. Okay, I think all the marking is done. So you should have received the mark from your last week submissions. Guys, one thing that I want to remind you is that it's a large class, and I can't go through every single mark that you received. So this is your responsibility to check out if the marking is correct, if you've received the mark at all, because we make mistakes. And in case we made mistakes, we would be happy to fix it. But we can't double check things. So please check out your submissions, your mark. First of all, you would see your mistakes, and you would be able to learn from it. Second, you make sure that there is nothing wrong with the marking, because at the end of the day, all these markings would contribute to your final mark. Any questions so far? Nope. Last week, the tutorials, the group work. Nope. Okay, good. Just another reminder, guys, tutorials which are all scheduled for tomorrow is not just for tutorial problems. I know that you would use it to solve the problems and work with your friends, but it is a good time to work on your group as well. I gave you a reminder last week that you could actually finish your group project up to here, up to the bar chart. Now you can do the project network and CPM as well. So whatever time that passes from now on, you're just losing time. You've got the ability to do all these things that I mentioned last week as well, plus the project network, and by the end of the class today, plus CPM. So my suggestion is that do not leave it for later on. If you haven't started yet, the tutorial time is the best time to work on these things. Go there, talk to your tutor, talk to your peers, and get it done. I'm not saying get it started. You should have started by now. If you haven't, you lost a very good chunk of time. Because in terms of the content is going to get trickier and trickier. So this week you will see some sort of complexity. Next week your brain is going to really hurt. And you can't afford thinking about other things, because just addressing the contents and the tutorial questions and so on would be enough. So my suggestion is, I can't really do anything about it. I can just suggest you to get started with your group work. Do not leave it for later on. And these are the sections plus the CPM. So CPM would come after the project network that you could have done by the end of this week. Any question about the group project? So just as a reminder, the project is due by the end of week 11, Friday, end of week 11, which would be 7th of October. Nope. Concern, comment, question? Okay. So let's start with the lecture. So just as a quick reminder, these are the activity relationships that we talked about in the bar chart session. We've got finish to start, and we looked at finish to start last week. Start to start, finish to finish, start to finish. And just as a quick recap, start to start is when start of an activity depends on the start of the other activity. Finish to finish is when the finish of an activity depends on the finish of the other activity. So if I'm doing the successor activity, the finish of my work depends on the finish of your work. I have to wait for you to finish, and then I can finish. And then we had a start to finish, which means the finish of this depends on the start of the other one. And if you remember, we had that example of competition and training. So the finish of training depends on when the competition is going to start. So we had this kind of relationship, plus we had lead and lag, and we looked at lag last week, so you could see how we can address lag in a critical path method implementation. Okay, so let's go back to the activity box. So this is the box that we talked about. So that box represents an activity. That's early start, early finish, late start, late finish. We write the activity ID at the top, duration at the middle at the bottom. There are two pieces of information that you already used. I just want to emphasize that the left-hand line, so the red line here, the red side represents start. The right-hand side of the box represents finish. And if you remember, all the relationships are between the starts and finishes of activities, right? So when you want to show a relationship, you should show it like this. So all the relationship arrows should go into and from the sides of the boxes. And I've seen this last week, but we didn't mark it down because I wanted to actually talk about it. So if you draw an arrow like this, what does this mean? Can you figure out what sort of relationship is this? Can you? Does this arrow at the top tells you, it's a relationship finish or start? Does it? Yes or no? No. So having an arrow to the top or the bottom of the box doesn't have a meaning. You can't look at this arrow and figure out the relationship is between finishes or starts or finish to start or whatever. Therefore, these kind of arrows are not acceptable, and if you draw a network like this, we mark you down because it's absolutely wrong. So all the relationships in your network should look like this. Should relate the finishes or starts of activities to each other. Not the top of the box, not the bottom of the box. You with me? Yes? Okay. So if you accept this premise, then when you've got a finish to start relationship, which we had it last week, the finish to start would be finish to start. It will look like this. Easy. That's the one that you've done last week. From the finish to the start. If it is finish to finish, guys, I'm showing you these things because if you remember, the very first step of doing a CPM is to draw the network. So when you are drawing the network, you should know how to draw the arrows. Because if you get the network wrong, everything else would be wrong. So when you see a finish to finish relationship, again, the relationship is between the finish and finish, so you draw an arrow between the finishes of activities. If the relationship is between a start to start, this is a start, this is a start, you draw an arrow between two starts. So from start to start. And if it is start to finish, this is the start of the activity, this is the finish of the activity, so there should be an arrow between a start and finish. So when you are drawing the network, you draw the box, you draw the relationship. Draw the box, you draw the relationship. And this is how you draw the relationships. You look at the relationship and you draw an arrow between the starts and finishes. Any questions so far? Nope? Okay. So now let's see how we calculate those early start, late finishes, and late starts, and all those dates when there is a start-to-start relationship. So at the moment, this is just normal. Just as a quick reminder, so if this is 5, when should be the early finish of C? Guys, wake up. Wake up. What's the early finish? 13. Fantastic. So 13. When is the earliest start of D? 13. Early finish? 18. Okay, so this is just normal. That's a reminder from last week. Now let's say there is a start-to-start relationship between activity D and F. You see the relationship start to start. You see how I draw it? And it could go from this side to this side. That still should be okay. But looking at this arrow, I can tell this is the start of the activity, that's the start of the activity, so the relationship is start to start. Now, when is the early finish of activity E? It's, oopsie, it's 8. 3 plus 5, 8. Now the question is, when is the early start of activity F? For going to the earliest start of activity F, one option is I can take the finish of activity E and I can put it there. Agree? Yes? So one option is 8. The other option is I'm going forward. I'm following the arrows. There is another arrow coming from the start of D to the start of F. So this arrow would tell me that 13 from here should go there. I'm just following the arrow. So I've got another option. 13. So I'm calculating the start of F. There are 2 arrows going to start. Because I've got 2 arrows going to start, I've got 2 options. I've got 8 and I've got 13. Which one should I choose? Which one? 13. I'm going forward, I choose the bigger one. Same rule. So the start of F would be 13, finish of F would be 23. So when you are doing your forward pass, just follow the arrows. And the arrows would give you the options that you have. Now let's do the backward. So now I'm going backward. Those green boxes are just my assumptions. So I haven't calculated them. I just put in 18 and 24 for now. Right? So activity F, if the late finish of activity F is 24, then what should be the late start? Late start, 14. 24 minus 10, 14. Now, I want to calculate the late start of activity D. I'm here. Late start of activity D. I'm going backward. I'm following the arrows backward, right? There are 2 ways to calculate this box here. I can go just, the normal way. I can go 18 minus 5, 13. Or I can go from this arrow backward, which is 14. I take 14 and I put it there. So there are 2 ways into the same box. There is one way here, 18 minus 5, and there's another way from here, 14. Remember, I'm going backward. I'm just looking at the bottom row. So there is 14 here. I can take 14 and I can put it there. So between 13 and 14, I've got 2 options. Which one should I choose? 14 or 13? 13. I'm going backward. I choose the smaller one. Yes? 24, my assumption. I haven't calculated it. So those green boxes there, I just put it there. It's part of the network. So between 13 and 14, same rule applies. Going backward, I choose 13. And for activity E, it's just normal. There's only one arrow going backward. 14 goes there. 14 minus 5, 9. And for activity C, 13 goes there. 13 minus 8, 5. Any question? Nope. Okay. So if there is no question, I'm passing around these sheets. So when you get the sheet, start working on question 1. Question 1. Okay. Guys, sorry to interrupt you. This might be a question for many. That start-to-start relationship. Guys, pay attention for a second, please. The start-to-start relationship there is between D and E. So there is a finish-to-start relationship between B, which I haven't written. And there is a start-to-start relationship between D and E.
Guys, I want you to enter the result into this session ID, into response bar, because I know there's a lot of confusion. And if you can't figure out the result, choose other. Choose other. But I want you to take a stance. Do something. If you find a result, put it there. If you couldn't, put in other. So the question is activity E, late start. That's the question. Activity E, late start. Guys, if you can't figure out an answer, if you're struggling, choose other. But I want you to choose something. So go to rwpol.com and choose one of those options. I give you 2 more minutes. Okay, 20 seconds. 20 seconds.
Okay, so let's see what you thought. That happened again. Uh-oh. Guys, if I refresh this, and give you another 20 seconds, can you put in your answer again? I really want to see how you went. So I refresh it. So repo. So it should be open now. Can you answer again, please? How many responses did we have? Done? Everyone is done? Yep? Okay, fingers crossed. Yes, okay. So, we had a range of answers, which looks really good. Okay, there were 6 who thought the answer is, there was no 11. That's not bad. There's no 11. There's 6 who thought it is 12. 25, which is majority, who think it's 13. We had 17 as well, and we had other. Okay, so let's see what the answer is. So the answer is 12. And I go through this slowly so you get it. The main mistake that you perhaps made is this relationship here. So the relationship is between activity E and D. So I'm pretty sure you got the direction of the arrow wrong. And if you got it wrong, I think your answer would have been 13. Is that right? So 13 is wrong because of this reason. Guys, let me explain to you. Please pay attention. It's just the business as usual. Look at, so ignore D and E. Ignore the whole table. Just look at activity B and A here at the top. The direction of the arrow goes from the predecessor to the successor. Agree? You go from A to B and you don't even think about it. Automatically you go A, B. Right? Again, here you go from A to C. You go from B to E. Same thing, you have to go from E to D. You go from predecessor to the successor. And it's important because the table is telling me that the start of D depends on the start of E. If you go other way around, you're saying that the start of E depends on D, which is not the case. So E is the predecessor to D, that's why the direction should be from E to D. And it is a start-to-start relationship, so you can see that it's from start to start. Okay, now I want to do the whole thing. I've got the network right, I know that the arrow is correct, it goes from E to D, and now let's do the forward pass. Forward pass, I start from 0, 0 plus 5, 5. 5 goes there, 5 plus 3, 8. For activity C, 5 plus 7 goes to 12. For activity E, there's only one arrow going to activity E. There is only one arrow, therefore there is only one option. So I take that 12, I put it there. And 12 plus 5 would give me 17. For activity D, for the start of activity D, there are two arrows going to start. There is one arrow going from B, there is another arrow going from E. So from activity B, one option would be 8. From activity E, the other option would be 12. Between 8 and 12, I choose 12. So D would be the earliest start. D's earliest start would be 12. 12 plus 10, 22. For activity F, there are two arrows going to activity F, so I'm going to have two options. I've got 22 and 17. I choose 22. 22 plus 3, 25. So the completion time of the first thing is 25. Now I'm ready for the backward pass. The backward pass, I'm starting from 25. 25 minus 3, 22. 22 goes there, 22. 22 minus 10, 12. Activity E, I take 22, I put it there, 22. 22 minus 5 is 12. However, there is another arrow going backward into activity E. So I can go 22 minus 5, or I can go 12 and take it and put it there. 22 minus 5 would give me 17. 22 minus 5 would give me 17. 12 from there goes there. So between 12 and 17, I choose 12. I'm going backward. So I choose the earlier date. I choose the smaller figure. So between 12 and 17, I choose 12. And then activity C, 12 goes there, 12 minus 5, minus 7, 5. Activity B, 12 minus 3, 9. Activity A, between 9 and 5, I choose 5. 5 minus 5, 0. That would be my network. Take note, just fix your mistakes now, because you may use your worksheet later on. So fix your mistakes, make sure you get it right. Yes? Very good question. And give me about 30 seconds. Very good question. Okay, so you've got all the figures. Now, let's think about critical path. So for critical path, first of all, I need to find out what critical activities are. And the critical activities are the ones that have same starts and same finishes, right? So activity A is critical. Start 0, and early finish is 5, late finish is 5, late start is 0, activity A is critical. Activity C, same thing, 5, 5, 12, 12, this is critical. Activity D, critical. Activity F, critical. Now, where is the path? Is there any path between C and D? Yes or no? Can I go A, C, D, F, critical path? Is there a path? Now look at the start of activity E. Start of activity E, let's see what this is talking about. It says activity E has to, the earliest start on activity E is 12. The latest start for activity E is 12. It means activity E has to start on day 12. It means the start of activity E is critical. What about its finish? So the early finish is day 17, the late finish is day 22. Does it have to finish on day 17? No. It can finish on day 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. So activity E has no flexibility at the beginning, but it has the flexibility at the finish point. And this is possible, and you can see that. Why the start of activity E is critical? Because D is critical, and D depends on the start of E. E has to start, otherwise D cannot start. So the critical path for me would be A, C, start of E, D, F. Get it? So when you've got the start to start, finish to finish relationships, this might happen. It's not always the whole activity that is critical. Sometimes the start of the activity is critical. Sometimes its finish is critical. Any question? Guys, do you want to have a break? Early break? Who wants to have a break? I'm seeing a lot of yawning. Be honest with you. Be honest with yourself. If you need a break, let's have a break and come back fresh. Do you want to have a break? No. Okay, so stop yawning. I gave you the chance to go out, have a fresh air, wash your face. You didn't take it. Here we go. That was the first one. Okay, so we talked about, any question about this start-to-start relationship? Nope? Okay. So now let's look at the finish-to-finish relationship. So this is just a normal part of a network. Between activity C and D, there is a finish-to-start relationship. That's just normal. Let's say there is a finish-to-finish relationship between activities C and E. So now I'm going forward. For going forward, look at this. So I'm calculating the early finish of activity E. The finish of activity E here. There are two ways to get there. I can go 3 plus 4, 7. Or I can take that 12 and follow this arrow and put it there. You see what I'm doing? If I get the network right, what I'm doing, when I'm doing forward pass, I just follow the arrows. And when I go backward, I follow the arrows backward. And I'm very, very strict with it. So activity E, to this little box here, there are two ways to get there. There is 3 plus 4, 7, and there is another arrow coming down there. So I take that 12, the arrow would take 12 and put it there. So between 7 and 12, which one should I choose? 12. I choose 12. Activity F, there is one arrow going to activity F, 12 goes there, 12 plus 10, 22. Activity D will be the same, 12 plus 5, 17. Any question about forward pass? Okay, now let's go backward. So those 18 and 22 are just my assumptions. Activity F, 22 minus 10, 12. Activity E, there is only one arrow going backward into activity F. there's only one arrow going backward from F to E, so I can take 12 and I can put it there. 12 goes there, 12 minus 4, 8. Now, let's look at this. The late finish of activity C, this little box here. There are 2 arrows going backward into that box. One arrow going from here, 12 can go there. And another one from here. So the start of D can be the finish of C. So another option would be 13. Between 12 and 13, which one should I choose? I choose 12, and I move on. Any question? So the same thing. So when you see start to finish, finish to finish, start to start, don't freak out. Just be methodic, follow the arrows, and you will be fine. If there is no question, you've got your question too. This time should be easier.
one more minute. Guys, 10 seconds. Get your answers in. Get your answers in. I want to make sure you got it right. Okay. So we had 8, 11, 13, 15, no 13, no 15, and a few other. Okay. Let's change it to numbers. So the question was activity B late finished. Let's see what the answer is. The answer is 11. So you've done much better than last time. But guys, still there is confusion, so I'll explain this slowly. So the relationship, the finish-to-finish relationship is between activity C and B. And the direction of the relationship goes from the predecessor to the successor. So the direction of this arrow, which is finish to finish, first of all, you should get the arrow right. It's finish to finish. So it goes from the finish to finish. Second, the direction of the arrow goes from C to B. From C to B. So that's the direction. And the rest of it is just finish to start relationship. So your network should look like this. And now, let's do the forward pass. So I start from 0, 0 plus 4, 4, 4 goes there for B, 4 plus 3 would be 7, but I can see that there is another arrow coming into the finish of activity B. So I stop. I don't put 7 there, because there are two options. So I look at activity C, 4 goes there, 4 plus 7, 11. Now these two options would go to the finish of activity B. 11, which is the finish of activity C, can go to the finish of activity B. Or 4 plus 3, 7. So between 7 and 11, I choose 11. So I'm going forward. The finish of activity B would be 11. 11 goes to the start of activity D. 11 plus 8, 19. Start of activity E would be 11 as well. 11 plus 5, 16. Between 19 and 16, I put 19 there. 19 plus 3, 22. So the project would finish on day 22. Now I'm going backward. 22 minus 3, 19. 19 goes there. 19 plus 5, 14. 19 goes there. 19 minus 8, 11. 11 goes there. There's only one arrow going backward. For the finish of activity C, there are two arrows going backward into the finish of activity C. There is 14 going there, and there's 11 from activity B. Between 11 and 14, I choose 11. 11 minus 7 would be 4. 11 minus 3 would be 8. Between 8 and 4, I choose 4. 4 minus 4, 0. Any question? The ones who made the mistake, I don't know where you went wrong. Was it the direction of the arrow? the ones who made the mistakes, so I'm talking to these people, those 5 and 4. You got it now? Yes? Okay. So this time the critical path would look like this. So A is critical, C is critical, the finish of B is critical, D is critical, and F is critical. Any question on the critical path? No? Okay. Now I want to introduce another topic on the same time. Do you want to have a break? Yes? Okay, go for it. 10 minutes. So it's 9:25. We start 25 to 10. No, it says finish up page. Actually write it down. Finish up page. Guys, 25 to 10, we start again. Okay, let's start, guys. Before I start, there are a few very good questions about group project. Finally, you guys are asking about group project, so I'm happy. But I think this is relevant to everyone. A very common question is that, are you allowed to use Microsoft Project? The answer is no. Right? Because Microsoft Project does everything for you. So all these calculations that you are doing now, Microsoft Project does it for you. And that's not the point for this course. You want to know what Microsoft Project does. That's why you are learning the planning methods. The difference between you and an operator is the understanding. So you can put all this information, into Microsoft Project, and Microsoft Project would give you that network. But you would never ever know what happened, how Microsoft Project came up with that network. And if there is a mistake, you can't pick it up. The reason that you are doing this course is to understand what's happening behind the scenes, how the planning is done. So no planning software, including Microsoft Project, is allowed. But you're allowed to use any other software for drawing boxes, for doing the other calculations. That's up to you. What I don't want the software to do your group project. I hope you get the point. Question?
Yeah, so would you recommend doing like a pretty basic sort of project?
It should be a pretty basic project, yes. So if you look at the assessment guide, it says between 20 and 30 activities. Because you are doing everything manually, it shouldn't really be huge, right? Between 20 and 30 activities, 25, 28, I don't know, around 30 activities would be good, would be a good size. Because there's a lot that you need to do. You know, when you get to the crashing, then you have to do the network 5 times. And if you've got 200 activities, that's a nightmare. You can't just do it. You need to use software. Any other question? Okay, so now let's go back to the critical path method and this new concept. It's not new, we've touched upon it, but now we want to put a name for it. So let's say this is the activity box. It says the earliest start is 8, early finish is 15, latest start is 10, late finish is on 17. So I use a bar chart to see what this box is talking about. So let's say this is the earliest start day, 8, that's 15.
So the activity can be done here between 8 and 15 on a bar chart. And if this is the late start and this is late finish, the activity can be done at any point of time between these two starts. So it can start on day 9, it can start on day 8, and it can start on day 10. And this is the flexibility that we are talking about. Some of the activities, you've got the flexibility to delay them. It's your option. Guys, do not confuse this flexibility with lag. Lag is not your option. Lag is the waiting time that you have to wait. But this kind of flexibility that we call float is your option. And we usually use the float to manage our resources. We know that, you know what, I can do this activity later, it's not going to have an impact on the project, and I can manage my resources better, so let's do it later. Because you know that there is not going to be an impact. So the difference, this flexibility that you have here, is called float or slack. So how much slack do I have? How much? 2 days, right? How did I calculate that 2 days? The 2 days is the difference between 10 and 8. Agree? Yes? So whenever you're calculating the float or slack, you go 10 minus 8. You go late start minus early start. You go late finish minus early finish, and it will give you the slack. So 2 days, 2 days. So what this concept is talking about is the flexibility that you have in implementation of your activities, how much you can actually delay it without an impact. That's the meaning of it. How do you calculate it? It's the difference between these two, between 10 and 8, between 17 and 15. Where do you write it? You write it there. So these are 2 remaining boxes on your activity box. So the figures that is written in between gives you the amount of slack and flexibility that you have. Any question? No? Okay. So now look at this network. I talked about this flexibility and the slack and the impacts and so on, but let's actually see it on the network. I want to show you what happens when we are using the slack and what happens when a critical activity is delayed. Right? So let's say activity D is delayed. So instead of day 11, it starts on day 12. Right? If it starts on day 12, when does it finish? Day 20. If it finishes on day 20, when G starts? Day 20, right? When does it finish? 23. If G finishes on day 23, what happens to I? I starts on day 23, finishes on day 25. So I delayed activity D, the whole project was delayed. Now you can see why we are talking about critical path. Now you can see why we are talking about floats, why we are talking about critical activities. Think about a 2-year project with 2,000 activities. And in month 2, right, so it's a 2-year project, in month 2, something happens to one of the critical activities. In month 2, you can predict that if you can't do anything about this, if you don't rectify it, after 2 years, the whole project is going to be delayed. You see how important it is? So one activity at the very beginning of the project, because we know it is critical, we know what the consequences is going to be for the rest of the project. That's why it is important for us to understand critical activities. That's why we are doing all these calculations. Because early on we want to know what the consequences are going to be if this activity is delayed, if there is a weather impact, if we don't have the resources. And it's invaluable to have that information. because very early on you can actually predict. So activity D was critical. That's why when it was delayed, the whole project was delayed. Now, let's look at activity F. Let's delay activity F for 1 day. So instead of day 12, I start on day 13. Then when does it finish? When? 18. The start of H would be 18. Finish of H would be 21. Is there an impact on I? Yes? Yes or no? No. So activity F was delayed, but nothing happened to the whole project. When I delayed activity F, was there any consequence in the project? I'm not talking about the end of the project. There was some consequences. So activity F was delayed, and as a result, H was delayed. Agree? But the whole project, the finish point of the project remained the same. So I had some flexibility in terms of not impacting the whole project. This kind of flexibility is called total float. So the flexibility that you can delay an activity and it doesn't have an impact on the whole project is called total float. Yes?
Can you have like change the duration, just go a bit slower without activity and change the duration? Like say we change that 5 to 7, change it that way.
It may happen. So this is your plan, right? In reality, you start implementing the activity, you start on time. But instead of finishing on day 17, you finish on day 18 or 19. Still you can see that there is no impact there. Why? Because I've got flexibility at the end of the activity. So I know how much flexibility I've got at the start. I know how much flexibility I've got at the end. Yes?
So when the time went over, you 2 days float, and it would just affect the whole project?
Yes. So I know that the maximum float that I have is just 2 days. And you can try it. So if instead of 2 days, the activity is delayed for 3 days. So instead of finishing on day 19, it finishes on day 20. Then this would be 20. 20 plus 3 would be 23. Then this would become 23. 23 plus 2 would be 25. The whole project is delayed. So it gives you the maximum flexibility. Question? Yes? Yes? And exactly on question 1 and question 2, you had an activity that had a critical start, for example. Critical start means 0 flexibility. So it is possible to have different floats for starts and finishes. It means it has to start on time, but you've got some flexibility for finishing it. Yes. Yes. Remember, this is a plan. When you go into reality, you have to always control and monitor. Question? So you could see that I delayed an activity. It impacted the next one, but it didn't have an impact for the whole project. This is called total float. Guys, by the way, this is called total. I'm not totaling anything. I'm not summing up, the floats. It's just a name. And there is a reason for that name, but don't confuse it with, adding up different numbers. I'm not totaling anything. So now let's look at activity H. So the total float, guys, calculation of total float is easy. You go latest start minus earliest start, late finish minus early finish. So this is 0, that's 0, that's 2, that's 2, and these are your total floats. Okay, now let's look at activity H. Now I'm delaying activity H for 1 day. So instead of day 17, I'm starting on day 18. If I start on day 18, when does it finish? Day Okay, when I start on day 18, it will finish on day 21. Is there an impact on the next activity? Is there an impact on the whole project? When you can delay, when you've got a flexibility in activity, that there is, if you use that flexibility, there is no impact on anything else. It's just the activity that is delayed. This float, this slack is called free float. So this is the difference between total float and free float. Total float, if you delay an activity, there is a consequence, but no impact on the whole project. Free float, if you delay the activity, nothing would happen to any other activity afterward. So the total float is about an activity and the whole project. Free float is about an activity and the activities afterward. It's about the relationship between activities. You get it? So as you can see, activity H was delayed once, nothing happened to activity I. It can be delayed twice and nothing happens to activity I. So now let's look at the free float. Activity F, that one. How much is the free float for activity F? So I've had 2. The question is, what is the free float for activity F? I've had 0, I've had 2. Who says 2? Yes? Why 2? Because it's written 2 days there. Who says 0? Because? It has or it doesn't? It doesn't have an impact on the next one? We're talking about for activity F. It does have an impact. So the free float is about an activity and the activity is afterward. So if you delay activity F for 1 day, is there an impact on the next one? Yes or no? Yes? It means it doesn't have free float. So the free float for activity F would be 0. The total float, though, is 2. So if I delay activity F, H would be delayed, but I wouldn't be. That's why it has total float. But it doesn't have free float. Because as soon as you delay it, there are some consequences. There is an activity afterward that is going to be delayed. Question? Yes?
So what's the free float, the number associated to it? Is it like number 1 is if it affects one activity, or is it just 0?
No. The free float is the amount of flexibility. How many days you can delay it.
Yeah, right.
So now let's look at activity H. What is the free float for activity? The free float for activity D would be obviously 0. There is no float, there is no slack for activity D. Activity G is 0. Activity H, what is the free float for activity? Guys, you two, do you want to keep laughing? You don't have to say. I'm really sorry to be serious, but I have to be. So let's look at activity H. What is the free float for activity H? 2. How did I figure that out? I can see that the end of activity H is 20. The start of the next one is 22. Right? So these are 2 figures that I'm looking at. The start of I, the finish of H. H finishes on day 20. I starts on day 22. Between 20 and 22, I've got some flexibilities. Agree? How many days? 2 days. So when I want to calculate the total float, I look into the box. Total float in the box. I look at the late start, early start, late finish, early finish. That's total float. When I want to calculate the free float, I look beyond the box. I look at the next box. And I see that the finish of H is day 20, the start of I is day 22. It means I've got some flexibility between these 2. So the free float for activity H would be 2 days. Question?
If the early start for I was 21, would the free flow for H be 1?
Correct. Yes. So the question is, if I's earlier start, that 22, was 21, then the free flow for activity H would have been 1. So I've got only 1 day flexibility. If the start of I was 30, then the free flow would have been how many days? 10 days. Because H finishes on day 20, I starts on day 30, it means I've got 10 days of flexibility in between. Yes?
What are the numbers in the middle column doing if the gap changes and they stay the same? If the gap changes and the free flow changes,
What do you mean gap? What do you mean gap? What do you mean by gap?
So when you were saying the early finish of I would change to 30,
Yep.
you bring a gap of 10.
Mm-hmm.
So does that mean those the numbers in between on H, those
Would stay the same.
stay the same?
Stay the same.
And what are they meant to symbolise?
That's the total float. Okay, so it depends. So if this stays at 30, this is 30, right? The difference, okay, when you want to calculate that point, that middle box there, you calculate it using the late finish and late finish and early finish, right? If the late finish changes, then that would change. Yes? So if here I've got 30 as well, so if I's start is 30, latest start of I is 30, then that would be 30 as well. Then your total float would have changed. So it depends on that late finish. Question? So the total float is about an activity and the whole project. Free float is about an activity and the following activities. Now you've got your third question. And the question is, what is activity B free float? Guys, you've got all the durations on the board. I've drawn the network for you, so you don't need to draw it again. So you just need to take note of the durations. And you have to do the forward pass, backward pass, and give me the answer on the free float for activity B. No, you don't choose. You don't choose. You say the start of the day is 1, finishes 0. You don't have to say.
Two different things.
if you're confused, if you don't know what to do, choose other. Guys, 30 seconds. 30 seconds from now. Okay, so I'm closing the poll now. We had 0, 1, 2, and other. Okay, good. Thanks for trying. Okay, so your critical, your CPM should look like this. So if you got the figures wrong, then definitely that's the reason your answer is wrong. So the completion time for the whole project is 24. Guys, now you know about floats. Now you know about floats, and you know how to calculate the total float. So basically, total float is the difference between these two figures. So 50 minus 2, 13. 19 minus 6, 13. For G, 19 minus 12, 7. 22 minus 15, 7. So when you finish your backward pass, the next thing that you need to do is to calculate the total floats. Why we do that? Because when you calculate the total float, then finding the critical path is super easy. You just follow zeros. Look at this, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, that's critical path. So you just look at the network, you follow the zeros, that's the path. In question 1, question 2 that you've done today, again, the start of one of the activities had 0. So that 0 was part of the critical path.
the finish of another activity was had 0, so that finish was a part of the critical path. So you find out the total floats and you connect the zeros, that's your critical path. Then it will be super easy. Now let's look at the free floats. So the ones that don't have floats at all, they don't have free float either. There is no flexibility whatsoever. So the question is not about A, C, D, E, H, and I. We know that there is no float. Activity B was the activity that the question was about. By definition, the free float is the amount of time that you can delay an activity without impacting any other activity or activities. So you can delay it with no consequence whatsoever, nothing. So if I delay activity B for 1 day, so instead of finishing on day 8, it finishes on day 9, then what happens? E will be delayed, yes? Does it have an impact on F? No. So if I delay activity B, there is no impact on activity F. However, activity E would be delayed. So there is no free float for activity B. So activity B don't have free float. It only has total float. So if activity B is delayed for 2 days, nothing is going to happen to I. Nothing. However, activity E would be delayed as well. So there are some consequences, but there is no consequence for the whole project. So activity E free float is 0. Activity E, what is the free float for activity E? What is the free float for activity D? 2 days. So E finishes on day 15, H starts on day 17. Between 15 and 17, I've got 2 days of flexibility. So the free float for activity E would be 2 days. What about activity, where am I, D? What is the free float for activity D? 6 days. So D finishes on day 6, G starts on day 12. Between 6 and 12, I've got 6 days of free float. What about activity G? How many days? 7 days. So G finishes on 15, I starts on day 22. It means I've got 7 days of flexibility. Guys, just for a second, look at activity D. Activity D has got 13 days of total float, right? From that 13, 6 days is free float. So if I start delaying activity D for 6 days, nothing would happen to activity G. So if I finish it on day 10, nothing would happen to G. If I finish it on day 12, nothing would happen to activity G, right? That means 6 days of free float. Now let's say instead of 6 days, I delayed for 8 days. So instead of day 6, it finishes on day 14. Then G would be delayed. G would start on day 14. It finishes on day 17. There is no impact on I. You see that? So that 13 days of total float for 6 days, there is no impact on the next one. After that, there is an impact on the next one, but still there is no impact on the very last one. So for 13 days, it can be delayed without an impact on activity I. Is there any question? The ones who had other and they got it wrong. Is it clear now? Yes.
If the start and finish floats are different, what would that be?
Okay, good question, guys, because I received this question a few times. So, guys, I made a mistake, and I think this is my mistake. I'm misleading you. So let's go back to this one. Okay, guys, so I received this question a few times, now I received it again. The question is, if the figures here between the start and the finish, the middle boxes, are different, what is the total float for the whole activity, right? If the floats are different, then which one do you choose? You don't need to choose. I've written these figures at the top of the boxes to explain things. You don't have to choose and write it at the top of the box. You actually mention both. You use both, right? So if they are different, let's say this is 0, that's 5, you just leave it there. As long as you write down 0 and 5, I know that there is no float at the beginning, there is 5 days of float at the end. You already said it. You know, you can see that I'm basically repeating these figures and I put it at the top of the box. It's a repetition. You don't need to repeat it. I've written it there to explain it. You don't have to choose. You don't have to write it at the top of the box. It's already written there. You can see that 2 is there, 2, 0, 0, 2. Yep? Did I answer your question? So you don't have to choose if they're different. You just write down both. And if I ask you, what is the total float? You say the total float for the start is this much, the total float for the finish is this much. And they're different. And they're different. They can be. Any other question? Nope? Okay, so on that note, we finish up today. Guys, next week is going to be really, really, really tricky. So get a good sleep beforehand.